What if I told you that uh, scrolling through your social media feed right now is statistically more dangerous to your physical health than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day?
I mean, it sounds completely hyperbolic, but the data backing that up is incredibly solid.
Right, exactly. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at the sad phone epidemic and the massive toll it is taking on our collective psychology.
And more importantly, we were looking at the trillion-dollar companies currently trying to build artificial intelligence systems that will multiply that very specific addiction by 10,000.
Yeah, we have a very clear mission today. We want to take you on a journey through the data, the history, and the underlying technology to answer a really profound question. Can AI actually disrupt human unhappiness?
It is arguably the defining question of our generation right now. And to tackle it, we're pulling from some incredibly dense and highly revealing source material today.
Yeah, the sources for this one are fascinating.
They really are. Specifically, we are looking at a keynote address and a subsequent fireside chat that took place in October of 2025. This was at the DC Startup and Tech Week.
And that was part of their Futurist and AI series.
Exactly. Which was notably co-hosted with Johns Hopkins University. So there is a lot of academic rigor behind this. And the two voices driving this discussion are absolute heavy hitters in the technology space.
Right. We have Sema Alexander, who is the CEO of Disrupted AI.
Yeah, and Paul Allen, who is the current CEO of SOAR AI. But I mean, he is perhaps best known to you as the former CEO and original founder of Ancestry.com.
Which gives him such a unique perspective on all this.
Yeah.
Because we are standing at a major crossroads right now. And the stakes for you, for your family, and for society really could not be higher.
No, they could not. We are essentially looking down two diverging paths for the future of humanity.
Yeah, down one path, AI ushers in this truly dystopian era where our misery just scales infinitely. It is an era where our attention is continuously commodified, sliced up into milliseconds, and sold to the highest bidder.
Right, by intelligent algorithms that know exactly how to keep us perpetually hooked and functionally paralyzed.
Exactly. But down the other path, these sources outline a radical alternative, a path where AI actually helps architect a prosperous utopia built on shared abundance.
A world where we actually reclaim our time, where our personal productivity skyrockets, and we use that newly found freedom to focus on the things that actually give human life meaning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand where artificial intelligence is taking us and the specific traps waiting for us, we first have to take a hard analytical look backward.
We have to analyze the fundamental failures of the very last technological revolution we all lived through.
I'm talking about the smartphone and the Web 2.0 social media era.
Yeah, and Paul Allen frames this previous era in very stark terms. He refers to the modern smartphone as the sad phone.
The SAD phone, which is an acronym, right?
Yes, it stands for stress, anxiety, and depression. And when we look at the sociological data over the last 15 years, we are seeing all-time historical highs for all three of those metrics across global society.
Especially concentrated among younger demographics who grew up as digital natives. It's honestly terrifying.
It really is. Allen points out the sheer staggering volume of human potential being poured into these devices. We are talking about literally trillions of cumulative hours being wasted globally.
Trillions with a T.
Yes, trillions of hours spent mindlessly scrolling through infinite feeds on platforms like TikTok and Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram.
I mean, I am trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of that waste. How did we build a global communication network that resulted in mass depression? Because it wasn't an accident.
Far from it. These platforms were engineered by trillion-dollar companies utilizing very specific, highly optimized business models.
Right, they exist for one singular purpose.
Exactly, to monetize your time and your attention. They operate on what is essentially an AdWord action model.
Okay, but we need to define what that actually means under the hood, because it isn't just showing you a simple advertisement like a billboard.
No, not at all. These companies run complex behavioral futures markets. They build a psychological profile of you based on every single click, every pause, every time your thumb hovers over a video.
They track the micro-hesitations.
Yeah, they track it all. They then take your projected focus, package it, and sell it in real-time programmatic auctions to advertisers.
And the underlying mechanism is designed to trigger dopamine loops.
Precisely. The algorithm figures out very quickly that outrage or anxiety or envy keeps you scrolling much longer than contentment does.
Right, because if you are content, you put the phone down and go outside.
Exactly. Therefore, the system structurally prioritizes showing you content that makes you feel bad. Because a slightly anxious, slightly inadequate user is a user who keeps scrolling to find a resolution that never comes.
It is brilliant, but evil.
Yeah.
Your well-being is entirely absent from their mathematical equation.
Completely absent.
Honestly, your well-being is the raw material they are burning to power the engine. Just look at what Facebook did to the very concept of friendship.
Yeah, Alan argues they basically ruined the word friend.
They really did. You log on and you see a number telling you that you have 500 friends. But you don't really have 500 friends. You have an audience.
You have an algorithmically curated list of acquaintances whose heavily filtered vacation photos you occasionally consume.
Right. And the psychological impact of conflating a digital network with genuine human connection is devastating to our biology.
Because human beings evolved in tight-knit, highly interdependent tribes, our nervous systems expect that physical and emotional safety net.
Yeah, and when you replace that with digital likes, the brain registers a profound lack of actual security.
Which brings us back to that terrifying statistic from Gallup.
Right. Allen references a 2006 book published by Gallup called Vital Friends.
And the data in this book is just shocking. It shows that lacking close, genuine friendships is a physical danger to your body. Yes. Not having a few real friends triggers chronic cortisol release and basically eliminates your stress buffering mechanisms.
To the point that it is more dangerous to your health than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. It can literally shorten your lifespan by 10 years.
Wow.
10 years.
Yeah. A friend isn't someone who follows you online. It is a deep, sustaining, real-world connection.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the failure of Web 2.0 is exactly why the current transition to artificial intelligence is so incredibly critical.
Right. We have to look at the trajectory here.
If these massive tech companies cause this much quantifiable societal damage, this much stress, anxiety, and depression, using relatively rudimentary algorithms that simply optimize for user engagement, what happens when generalized AI enters the fray?
Oh, man, that is a scary thought.
We are dealing with models that possess deep reasoning capabilities, systems that are going to be 10,000 times more effective at capturing, analyzing, and holding human attention than the relatively simple feed algorithms of Web 2.0. I was trying to conceptualize the jump in capability here.
Right.
Web 2.0 was like giving everyone in the world a megaphone to shout for attention.
Right.
It was loud, it was chaotic, and it gave us all massive headaches. But AI, if deployed under the exact same advertising models, AI isn't a megaphone.
No, it is something entirely different.
It is like assigning a hyper-intelligent, invisible psychological manipulator to every single person on Earth. This AI knows exactly what buttons to push, what deep-seated fears to exploit, and what precise desires to dangle in front of you.
And it knows exactly what time of day your willpower is lowest.
Yes, exactly. If the underlying business model of the internet doesn't change, we aren't just continuing the sad phone era, we are weaponizing it.
That analogy perfectly isolates the threat vector. We are moving from generalized manipulation to hyper-personalized manipulation.
Which brings us directly to the core problem of the AI age, the problem of control and data sovereignty.
Right. If big tech companies are legally bound by fiduciary duty to prioritize their shareholders over your mental health, how do you defend yourself?
You have to look at who controls the underlying data.
And to truly grasp the gravity of this, Paul Allen walks us through a deeply personal, incredibly illustrative story from his own corporate history.
It is such a painful story about the fight over our literal historical past. We have to go all the way back to September of 1995.
Right. Paul Allen attends a small niche event in San Francisco called the Internet Developer 2 Conference.
And at the time, he had been working in CD-ROM publishing for years.
Yeah, his team was trying to fit the world's best books onto physical discs using a search engine called Folio, which was actually started by his brother.
Oh, wow. I didn't know his brother started that.
Yeah. But sitting at this conference watching the early emergence of the World Wide Web, he experienced a massive paradigm shift.
He realized the physical constraints of CD-ROMs were suddenly obsolete. The fundamental value proposition had changed overnight.
Exactly. Why buy a physical disk that is capped at holding 1,000 books when you can open a web browser and access a continuously updating network containing 1 trillion documents?
The frictionless nature of the internet meant the death of enclosed data silos. And he had a very specific revelation regarding genealogy.
He realized that all the world's birth records, marriage certificates, and death records, these massive, vital compilations of humanity, were entirely in the public domain.
Right. They didn't belong to a corporation. They belonged to all of us. So he decided they fundamentally belonged on the web, accessible to anyone trying to find their roots.
That realization was the seed. Ancestry.com launched in June of 1996 and officially incorporated in July of 97.
And the initial growth was just explosive because it tapped into a profound universal human desire to know where we come from and who we belong to.
But then the macroeconomic reality of the early internet hit them. We arrived at the dot-com burst in the year 2000.
This is where the story turns into a flashing warning sign for modern technology users. Ancestry was on the absolute verge of a massive $1 billion initial public offering.
Yeah, Merrill Lynch was running the banking side. Paul and his co-founder owned 97% of the company initially, which dropped to 25% right before the IPO to bring in investors.
They were moments away from cementing their vision. And then the market bubble burst.
The broader market crashed, capital completely dried up, and the venture capitalists involved panicked.
Paul quite pointedly refers to them as vulture capitalists in this specific scenario.
Yeah, he does. They utilized complex legal and financial maneuvers to essentially seize control of the company from the founders.
The founders' equity plummeted from 25% down to a mere 4%. Eventually, a private equity fund bought the company entirely in 2006.
But the real tragedy of this story isn't the loss of equity or personal wealth.
No, the tragedy is what happened to the data, and specifically what happened to the promise Paul had made to his users.
Right, because when he was the CEO, he held a very firm core belief. A human being should own and control their own family history data.
He didn't believe a faceless corporation should own your heritage. So he made a highly publicized promise to millions of amateur genealogists.
He told them, if you upload the decades of hard work you have done, pulling from old software like Family Tree Maker or Family Origins, if you upload all of that into the Ancestry World Tree, it will remain outside the paywall forever.
It will be free and available to all humans. And millions of people trusted that promise. They uploaded their life's work. They digitized the complex webs of their family histories.
But after Paul was ousted and the new corporate leadership took over, they ran the analytics. They looked at the server data and saw that 43% of the site's entire global traffic was going directly to this free Ancestry World Tree.
They saw a massive pool of unmonetized attention. And what did they do? They did exactly what any corporation legally bound to maximize shareholder value would do.
They quietly changed the terms of use, and they locked humanity's shared heritage behind a subscription paywall.
It is a textbook example of corporate capture. Paul couldn't do anything to stop it because he no longer controlled the infrastructure.
He uses this painful historical betrayal to perfectly illustrate the exact battle we are fighting today with artificial intelligence. Only now the stakes are exponentially higher.
Right. It is not just your great-grandfather's birth certificate that is at risk of being enclosed and monetized. It is your entire psychological, medical, and financial life.
Which brings us to a massive paradigm shift in how we talk about AI. Everyone right now is obsessed with prompt engineering.
Oh, yeah. The skill of learning how to type the perfect question into ChatGPT to get a good answer.
Exactly. But Paul argues that prompt engineering is essentially a distraction. He states that context engineering is 100 times more important.
Context engineering. This is such a foundational concept for surviving the AI era. Let's break down exactly what that means mechanically.
So context refers to the surrounding data of your life. It is the vast, invisible ocean of information you generate every single day. Context engineering means that you, the individual user, must retain total, uncompromised ownership and control over your health records, your financial history, your relationship dynamics, your social graph, your faith data, your educational history.
Every digital interaction you make, basically.
Yes, because right now the trillion-dollar tech companies are vacuuming all of that up. They are desperate for your context.
The more context they have in their centralized servers, the better their models can understand your vulnerabilities and the more effectively they can target you as a product for their advertisers.
Precisely. The necessary defense mechanism against being entirely commodified by these companies is a radical shift in software architecture.
We have to move away from centralized cloud data processing, where you send your private life to a server farm in another state.
We must move toward local, on-device, open-source AI models.
Okay, let's make sure we clearly understand the mechanics of this. We are talking about an artificial intelligence that lives entirely on your physical smartphone or your personal laptop.
Yes, it doesn't need an internet connection to think.
Wow. So you download an open source model, meaning the core code is public, transparent, and cannot be secretly altered by a corporation to serve you ads.
Right. You run this model on your own hardware. You then load your personal context into it locally. You create a system called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG, entirely on your device.
RAG, okay.
So the AI reads your private files, your emails, your health data, but that data never leaves your physical possession.
You create an impenetrable firewall between your intimate life data and the profit motives of big tech.
Exactly. But this is going to be a brutal fight, a true David and Goliath scenario.
Because who currently controls the physical hardware we all use? Google controls the Android ecosystem, and Apple controls iOS.
The fight over who gets to monetize your on-device context and whether they will even allow open source models to run efficiently on their silicon is going to define the power dynamics of the next decade.
It is the ultimate battle for digital sovereignty. If the profit motive fundamentally corrupted data stewardship in the Ancestry example, we absolutely cannot trust that same profit motive to steward our psychological profiles.
Open source local AI is presented as the only viable counterweight to ensure the intelligence serves the user rather than the advertiser.
But I have to push back on this vision. Is this actually a realistic expectation for the general public?
That is the big question.
I mean, expecting everyday people who struggle to remember their Wi-Fi passwords to become their own context engineers and manage local open source AI models, to me it's like telling people, hey, the highly processed food at the drive-thru is killing you. So to be healthy, you just need to buy some land, till the soil, grow all your own organic vegetables, and raise your own chickens.
It sounds exhausting when you put it like that.
Right. Like, yes, scientifically that is much healthier, but convenience is the undefeated champion of human history. Most people are just going to go to the drive-thru.
Yeah, you are not wrong.
How on earth do we make context ownership as frictionless as just downloading a closed-source app from big tech and blindly clicking I agree on the 50-page terms of service?
That is the most critical vulnerability in the open source movement. If managing your own context requires writing command line code, adjusting neural network weights, or buying specialized hardware, the battle is already lost.
The barrier to entry must drop to absolute zero.
But Paul Allen is highly optimistic about the trajectory of the hardware. The developer community is optimizing small language models at a breakneck pace.
Okay, so the technology is shrinking to fit our current devices.
We are seeing chips specifically designed for local AI inference being integrated into standard consumer laptops and phones right now. Within a very short window, downloading an open source model will be exactly as easy as downloading an app.
And managing your context will just be as intuitive as dropping files into a desktop folder.
Exactly. The software will handle the complex vector databases in the background completely invisibly to the user.
Okay, assuming the developers succeed and we win that battle. We successfully claim ownership of our context. The UI is frictionless, and we have this incredibly powerful, entirely private AI working exclusively for our benefit.
That is the dream scenario.
It instantly raises an even bigger question, though. What exactly are we supposed to ask our AI to do?
What do you mean?
If we are no longer optimizing for the algorithm's engagement metrics, what are we optimizing for?
Oh, right. We have to define the target. If we want an AI engineered to maximize human happiness, we must first deeply understand the empirical science of human thriving. We can't just guess at what makes us happy.
And this brings us straight into the data from Gallup. Paul Allen spent 5 years at Gallup working as an evangelist for what is now widely known as the Clifton Strengths Assessment.
He worked deeply within their massive data sets. And for context, Gallup is the organization that actually powers the United Nations Happiness Index.
Yeah, they poll millions of people across 160 countries around the world. They aren't dealing in philosophy. They have the hard empirical data on what statistically causes human beings to report high levels of happiness.
And they distill this massive global data set down into the 5 elements of well-being.
Let's break those down because this is crucial. The first one, and the data shows this is overwhelmingly the most important element, is career or purpose well-being.
The mathematical reasoning here is stark and unavoidable. You are going to spend roughly 80,000 to 90,000 hours of your brief human life at work.
That is a terrifying amount of time.
It is, and if you do not find purpose in that work, and if you do not genuinely like the people you're working alongside, it is statistically nearly impossible to maintain a high overall quality of life.
Paul's advice here is blunt. Do not try to shortcut the process of finding work and people you love.
That foundational sense of purpose acts as the bedrock that supports the other 4 elements. Those are financial well-being, physical well-being, social well-being, which connects directly back to the vital necessity of having close friends we discussed earlier.
Right, the vital friends concept.
And finally, community well-being. This asks, do you actually love the physical place where you live? Are you actively engaged with your neighbors, a faith group, or a local community organization?
But the current CEO of Gallup, John Clifton, taught Paul a critical distinction that completely reframes how we need to approach artificial intelligence.
He explained that society fundamentally misunderstands the word happiness because we conflate two entirely distinct psychological states.
There is experiential happiness and there's evaluative happiness.
This framework is absolute paramount for training AI. Experiential happiness is entirely moment by moment. It is fleeting. It is your immediate physiological mood.
Like, are you chuckling at a funny video clip? Are you feeling a sudden rush of excitement because someone liked your photo?
Yes, experiential happiness is like sitting in a car and pressing the gas pedal while the transmission is in neutral. You hear the engine roar, you feel the vibration, you get a rush of noise, but you aren't actually going anywhere.
Wow, that is a great way to describe it. It's a localized dopamine hit.
Exactly. Evaluative happiness, on the other hand, is completely different. Evaluative happiness requires putting the car in drive.
It requires taking a massive step back, looking at the grand sweeping arc of your entire life, and asking a profound question. Has this struggle been worth it? Does my life possess deep purpose and meaning?
The sources provide two incredibly poignant examples to crystallize what evaluative happiness actually looks like.
The first one really struck me. It is the legendary journalist Barbara Walters. Think about the scope of her life. 50 years traveling the globe, interviewing presidents, dictators, and the most fascinating, powerful people in human history.
She lived an incredibly rich experiential life.
Absolutely. But when she was asked in her later years to evaluate her life, she had one profound regret. She wished she'd chosen to have another child.
That is a pure evaluative assessment. It has absolutely nothing to do with her day-to-day mood or her career highlights. It is a deep reflection on legacy and meaning.
The second example comes from Paul Allen himself. He describes a highly specific moment in 2016. He had just finished delivering a major keynote speech at Gallup to an audience of 1,500 people.
He was buzzing with energy, but right after he stepped off the stage, the singer Andra Day came out and performed her incredibly powerful song, Rise Up.
He describes meeting her backstage afterward, hugging her with tears streaming down his face and being hit with this overwhelming realization.
He realized that his life had turned out to be so much more expansive and beautiful than he ever could have imagined as a teenager. He felt in that precise moment a deep peace. He felt he could die happy.
That is the absolute peak of evaluative happiness. And the massive glaring red flag that the sources are desperately waving at us is the temptation of technology.
The danger is that we will use AI to optimize our lives for experiential happiness completely at the expense of evaluative happiness.
Because experiential happiness is incredibly easy to hack. What drives a temporary mood shift? You can change your mood instantly with a drink. You can take drugs. You can endlessly swipe through highly curated, algorithmically perfect short-form videos.
Those inputs will absolutely deliver a temporary experiential boost to your neurochemistry. But the data shows that over the long term, optimizing solely for these short-term hits leads directly to physical decline, massive cognitive burden, and deeply depressive life experiences.
You hollow out your long-term meaning for short-term comfort.
There is a fascinating piece of research mentioned from Emory University conducted back in 2001. The researchers wanted to figure out the mechanisms of childhood resilience.
What makes a child capable of bouncing back from trauma, basically?
Right, and they discovered that the absolute #1 predictor of resilience in kids is how much they know about their family stories, specifically a concept they call the oscillating narrative.
An oscillating narrative is a very specific type of storytelling. It means knowing that your ancestors didn't just have perfect, unbroken streaks of success.
A child needs to know that their grandparents thrived, yes, but they also failed miserably. They faced enormous hardships, they lost jobs, they endured wars, they suffered deeply, but they survived and they rebuilt.
Connecting a child's mind to that generational rhythm of profound struggle and eventual triumph provides them with a psychological blueprint for their own inevitable failures. It builds immense inner strength.
This directly ties into the foundational work of Dr. Donald O. Clifton. Paul refers to him as the greatest psychologist of the 20th century.
Dr. Clifton wrote a blueprint for human thriving back in 1992 called Soar with Your Strengths.
His core thesis was a rejection of traditional psychology's focus on fixing what is broken. He identified that humans only truly achieve excellence and high evaluative happiness when they discover their innate natural talents and ruthlessly play to those strengths.
Rather than wasting their lives trying to incrementally improve their weaknesses.
What's fascinating here is how this psychological framework dictates the future of artificial intelligence. We have to look at the optimization functions.
If an AI is designed by a massive tech company utilizing an advertising model, it will intrinsically and ruthlessly target your experiential happiness.
It will monitor your biometrics and feed you exactly the digital stimulus you need to stay hooked, minute by minute, chuckle by chuckle. It devolves into a highly efficient dopamine dispenser.
But if we want to genuinely thrive, we must purposefully and intentionally design our personal open source AI to act as a coach that pushes us toward evaluative happiness.
We have to explicitly train the system to help us sacrifice short-term comfort to build long-term meaning.
But I have to wonder about human nature here. Experiential happiness is the path of least resistance. It requires zero effort. Evaluative happiness requires you to do really hard things.
It requires you to struggle to build relationships, to fail to learn the oscillating narrative.
Can an AI truly act as an effective life coach for evaluative happiness? Or will our inherent human laziness always pull us and the AI we are training back to the easiest possible dopamine hit?
It is incredibly hard work to build a meaningful life. It is effortlessly easy to let the AI generate another entertaining video. That is the tension at the heart of the technology.
It will require immense conscious discipline from the user to set those parameters.
But the sources argue that if we can successfully align our local AI with our long-term evaluative goals and our inherent strengths, the payoff is staggering.
Not just in our internal emotional well-being, but in our sheer external capability to impact the world, which leads us to a massive impending shift in how human beings actually operate in the physical economy.
We are entering completely uncharted territory here.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Once we get this alignment right, especially concerning our career well-being, which Gallup identified as the single most critical element, we unlock a level of personal productivity that frankly borders on magic.
The fundamental nature of work, the way we create value, is going to completely rewire itself over the next 18 to 36 months.
We are rapidly transitioning out of the chatbot phase and into the era of agentic AI.
We already know that generative AI is the fastest growing technology in the history of human civilization. ChatGPT hit 800 million weekly and monthly active users at a speed that shattered every previous adoption record.
But typing a question into a text box and getting a paragraph back is just the infancy of this technology.
Sema Alexander breaks down the mechanics of this beautifully in the fireside chat. We are moving from passive chatbots to active agents.
These AI agents are effectively becoming the new applications, but they possess deep reasoning and autonomy. We aren't just asking them questions anymore. We're giving them complex goals.
Paul points out that we are reaching a capability threshold where you can give an AI agent 10 minutes of detailed, nuanced voice instructions, and that agent will autonomously go off, write code, debug itself, and build software for 30 straight hours to create exactly what you asked for.
He compares this capability to an almost divine power, the ability for an individual to literally speak things into existence.
It represents a profound democratization of creation. To illustrate the mechanics of this, Sema shares a story about her time advising a company called Magic ML about 3 years ago.
They were pioneering these early agentic development environments.
She details meeting a highly experienced, high-end cinematographer who was using the platform to completely upend the traditional Hollywood workflow.
Think about what a cinematographer usually has to do. They spend months locked in rooms, writing out visual ideas, painstakingly segmenting scripts, drawing frame-by-frame storyboards, organizing lighting setups.
It is months of tedious, highly specialized human labor. But this guy used these integrated AI tools to bypass all of that friction.
He would dump his raw, unstructured ideas into ChatGPT to automatically segment them into scenes. He would then push those structured scenes via an API into an image generator like Midjourney to instantly create the storyboards.
Then he would feed those generated images into a video model like Runway ML to turn the still images into actual moving video clips.
He was taking months of painstaking, expensive human storyboard work and synthesizing it into high-fidelity video in a matter of minutes.
And we must remember that workflow was happening 3 years ago. The acceleration of the model since then is exponential.
Paul shares a story from the internal operations of his own company, Soar AI, that perfectly encapsulates the sheer mathematical scale of this productivity leap. It is a story of 1,000x improvement.
This specific example completely blew my mind because it quantifies the shift. Okay, the year is 2020. Paul's team is working with a corporate sales training company.
The goal is to build machine learning models that can listen to thousands of recorded phone call transcripts and automatically grade how well the human salespeople are following the company's sales methodology.
It is a highly complex, nuanced natural language processing task. In 2020, it required a massive human effort.
They needed domain experts to manually comb through thousands of dense transcripts, highlight good and bad examples of sales tactics, annotate the data, and painstakingly train the machine learning models to recognize the patterns.
That process took his team 3 full months of labor, and it cost $50,000 to build 5 functional machine learning models.
And they were proud of the result. The models were about 87% as effective as a human sales coach.
Okay, fast forward just 3 years to 2023. Their Google Cloud instance unexpectedly crashes, and the models go completely offline.
Instead of going through the nightmare of restoring the old architecture, Paul's co-founder decides to run an experiment. He wants to see if the new ChatGPT architecture can rebuild the system.
He sits down, writes a complex prompt detailing the methodology, and feeds it the raw transcripts. He accomplishes the exact same task, building the exact same grading capability in 15 minutes.
Let the math on that sink in.
Yeah.
A complex software engineering task that previously required 3 months of dedicated human labor and $50,000 in capital was reduced to 15 minutes of prompting at essentially zero marginal cost.
That is a 1,000x increase in speed and efficiency. And this isn't just happening in elite tech backrooms or corporate server farms.
Sema Alexander herself talks about how she used a process called vibe coding to build her own highly functional advanced website from scratch in just 2 weeks.
Wait, let's pause on that phrase, vibe coding. For the listener who might just be used to typing a recipe request into a text box, what is actually happening under the hood when someone vibe codes an entire functional website?
Vibe coding is a fascinating colloquialism for natural language software engineering. Traditionally, to build a website, a human developer has to write the underlying syntax, the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, the database architecture.
In vibe coding, the human provides the vibe, the intent, the aesthetic vision, the business logic, and the user flow using plain English.
The AI agent acts as the translation layer. It takes your English description, autonomously writes the thousands of lines of syntax, spins up the server, tests the code for errors, self-corrects any bugs it finds, and deploys the final product to the web.
The human acts as the director, while the AI acts as the entire engineering team. Sema even highlights a community event held at the MLK Library in DC, where tech leaders Kayla Love and Addie Cruz were teaching everyday people from the community how to vibe code their own apps.
It removes the syntax barrier entirely. And it isn't just restricted to building software and websites. These agents are now building human networks.
Paul details a startup out of Silicon Valley called Bordy.ai. They created an agent affectionately named Bordy McBoardman.
This agent lives entirely on WhatsApp. You sign up for the service, and this incredibly human-sounding AI literally calls your phone. It interviews you dynamically for 5 minutes.
It asks, what are you working on? What are your current bottlenecks? Who exactly are you trying to reach? It processes your answers to learn your ideal customer profile or your ICP.
And here is where the network effect takes hold.
Yeah.
Because Bordy has interviewed thousands or potentially millions of other professionals, it understands the intricate web of human needs across the platform.
It acts as your tireless, globally connected, omniscient assistant. Once it knows your goals, it starts autonomously emailing you every single day, matching you with the exact right human connections you need to secure funding, hire a lead engineer, or close a major sales deal.
It orchestrates the human economy. So what does this all mean for the future of society? If everyone has the power to vibe code, and everyone can speak complex applications into existence in an afternoon, and everyone has a Bordy McBoardman working 24/7 to make connections for them, doesn't that fundamentally break the system?
It is a valid fear.
If my autonomous AI is just talking to your autonomous AI to set up a meeting, how do human connections remain authentic? If the friction of creation drops to zero, doesn't the market just flood with an infinite ocean of synthetic noise?
This raises a profoundly important question about the paradox of extreme productivity. When you completely remove the friction between a human idea and its physical execution, the sheer volume of output is going to skyrocket across every single industry.
Healthcare diagnostics, legal briefs, educational curriculums, national security analysis, and daily business operations.
The primary challenge for humanity will completely shift. The challenge will no longer be creating content or finding a connection. The challenge will be curation.
It will be the exhausting task of filtering the massive wave of synthetic generation to find the authentic, meaningful signal.
But maybe that is exactly the point. Maybe all of this extreme productivity, this relentless 10x, 100x, 1000x scaling of our individual output, isn't actually supposed to be used just to do more work.
If I can do a month's worth of tasks in an hour, the end goal of speaking things into existence shouldn't be to build a larger, more stressful corporate empire.
The goal of this technology should be to give us back our most precious finite resource.
Time, unstructured, unhurried time. Time to spend with the people we love. Which brings us full circle back to the ultimate purpose of this deep dive, how we use AI to actively disrupt human unhappiness.
We started this exploration talking about the sad phone. We talked about how the previous generation of technology stole our attention, degraded our mental health, and fractured our relationships one algorithmic scroll at a time.
The ultimate overarching argument that Paul Allen makes is that we have an obligation to use this new, immensely powerful agentic AI to save ourselves from the damage of the old tech.
He shares a demographic statistic about parenting that is frankly devastating to hear, but absolutely vital for anyone listening to internalize.
If you are a parent, 99% of all the time you will ever spend with your child in your entire life happens between the day they are born and the day they turn 18.
Once they pack up and leave the house at 18, only 1% of your total time with them remains for the rest of your life. The window of influence and connection is shockingly brief.
Paul speaks from deep experience here. He has 8 children, and they are all over the age of 20 now. He is currently living in that final 1%. He knows, intimately, painfully, how fast that window closes.
And his advice to parents who are trying to raise kids right now in the toxic environment of the sad phone age is incredibly direct and uncompromising.
He forcefully advocates for delaying giving children smart devices until they are 16 or 18 years old.
He heavily references the sociological research of Jonathan Haidt, which draws a direct causal line between the explosion of severe anxiety and depression in youth and the introduction of front-facing cameras and social media algorithms.
And Paul points out a very telling, deeply hypocritical fact about the industry. Many of the elite technologists and executives in Silicon Valley, the very people designing these addictive interfaces, pointedly refuse to let their own children use the devices they create and sell to the public.
They know exactly how the sausage is made, and they keep it away from their kids.
Sema Alexander refers to this immense struggle as the messy middle of parenting, because it is incredibly hard to hold that line.
You face the constant agonizing pressure from your kids saying, "But Mom, I'm the only one in my class who doesn't have a phone. All my friends have one."
You risk them feeling socially ostracized. But then you have to look at the alternative paths to reclaiming that fleeting 99% of time.
Paul mentions a staggering statistic that parents who choose to homeschool end up with 3 to 4 times more actual physical hours with their kids by age 18 than those who put their kids through the traditional schooling system.
Now, he isn't dictating that everyone has to homeschool. He didn't homeschool his own kids, but he is highlighting the extreme measures we must actively consider to fiercely protect and reclaim those vanishing hours.
And this foundational philosophy of reclaiming human time and virtue drives the overarching mission of his current company, SOAR AI. They aren't just building agentic AI to help corporations optimize their profit margins.
They are deliberately building an AI architecture, a tech stack, that autonomously transcribes, analyzes, and coaches, and they are deploying it specifically for civic and community good.
We see this in their project citizenportal.ai. They've used AI to transcribe over 1.6 million hours of highly localized city, county board, state legislature, and federal government meetings.
They have effectively built the largest, most comprehensive civic news source in the world, using AI to bring massive transparency to the often ignored, tedious machinery of local government.
They're also deploying it for spiritual and community cohesion through their faith portal. They are using AI agents to ingest and capture the most uplifting, profound messages, sermons and teachings from synagogues, mosques, churches, and cathedrals all across the globe.
They're using the intelligence to find the highlights, synthesize the wisdom, and remind people of the most important messages of virtue, empathy, and value that humanity produces.
Because navigating this precarious divide between a techno-optimist utopia and an algorithmic dystopia requires far more than just writing smarter code.
Paul quotes the profound wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. "Darkness cannot overcome darkness, only light can." Paul argues that society is in desperate need of a moral restoration of virtue to guide the deployment of this technology.
He is synthesizing a very profound humanistic thesis here. Despite all the discussion of trillion parameter models and autonomous agents, The human being remains the single most important part of the happiness equation.
The true lasting value of artificial intelligence does not lie in replacing human interaction or simulating friendship.
The value lies entirely in its ability to completely automate the mundane, to eliminate the tedious busy work, and to handle the bureaucratic friction of modern life, so that we can be fully, deeply present for that fleeting 99% of time we are granted with our loved ones.
I look at it like this. Artificial intelligence should function like the invisible scaffolding of a massive house.
The AI holds up the heavy, tedious structural load. It manages the plumbing, the electricity, and the foundation.
But it stays completely out of the way so that we can actually live freely inside the rooms and focus all of our attention on enjoying the people we share those rooms with. We shouldn't be staring at the scaffolding. We should be living our lives inside the house.
That is the perfect visualization of the goal. We are striving for a prosperous utopia built on shared abundance, where invisible technology amplifies our humanity rather than suppressing and commodifying it.
So let's take a breath and recap the massive journey we have just been on together.
We started by confronting the deep psychological dangers of the Web 2.0 attention economy, examining exactly how our time and our dopamine were monetized, leaving society drowning in stress, anxiety, and depression.
We explore the vital, non-negotiable importance of context engineering the coming battle, to own our own personal data on our own devices, ensuring that AI serves us locally rather than serving a corporate advertiser.
We unpacked the critical life-altering difference between designing our lives for fleeting, algorithmic experiential happiness versus doing the hard work to achieve deeply meaningful, evaluative happiness.
We saw the awe-inspiring, almost magical power of agentic AI to literally speak our ideas into existence, multiplying our personal productivity by 1,000-fold and removing the friction of creation.
And all of it, every single mechanical advancement of this technological revolution leads back to one singular ultimate goal.
Reclaiming our finite time on this earth to spend it with the humans we love.
But before we end today, the synthesis of all these concepts raises one final, truly fascinating and somewhat haunting possibility.
We learned earlier, through that Emory University study, that knowing your family's oscillating narrative, the specific, detailed, unvarnished history of how your ancestors suffered, failed, and eventually thrived, is the absolute #1 predictor of psychological resilience in children.
Imagine a future, perhaps just a few years from now, where you have successfully engineered your local context. Your personal, entirely private AI has spent years learning all about your evaluative happiness.
It has processed your private journals, your emails, and your voice. It intimately knows your deepest struggles, your greatest triumphs, your core beliefs, and your unique worldview.
Imagine that long after you're gone, your personalized AI remains intact. Could this data structure become a living, interactive ancestor for your great-grandchildren?
Instead of just reading a dusty static journal or looking at a faded photograph, could your descendants have a real-time, nuanced conversation with an AI that passes down your exact wisdom, speaking in your voice, sharing your specific oscillating narrative, to give them profound resilience when they face their own inevitable hardships?
Will the